Hey everybody, this is Eli with Elfbait, and today I want to talk about character and player consequences. So, anytime you're playing a game, there is often a sense that the players and thus their characters can kind of get away with anything. And this is a combination of player personality and DM personality. And there are some things that you can do to try to mitigate those effects, or even try and work with that mentality to bring to play some deeper plot elements and stuff. So the key about this video is going to be about the consequences of player/character actions, and not in a context of punishment. This is not about punishing characters. This is not about getting back at your players for beating all of your monsters and then deciding to do a TPK that comes out of nowhere. This is not about wrecking their characters. This is about finding a way to make their actions in-game count for something. And so consequences, for the purposes of this particular video, I'm going to talk about the negative consequences. I think less needs to be said about rewarding players and their characters. There are all sorts of built-in rewards in the game already. There's experience, there are magic items, there are contacts, fame. There's also all sorts of rules that have been laid out to allow you to reward your players. So I'm going to focus more on what we can do as DMs to bring into play consequences of action in a way that is still in some way rewarding to the players and doesn't feel like you're just out to get them. Hopefully that thought process never comes in, but it is certainly a reality in some games. So first point I want to talk about is really knowing what is important to the players and their characters. And these are not necessarily the same thing. What's important to a character may not be the same thing that is important to a player. This happens a lot, for example, when you have people playing evil characters or characters that are very different from the individual who's behind the dice. First of all, chances are, if you've been playing with any particular group, you know your players well. You know who they are, you know what they're about, you know what makes them tick. If you're really at a loss, try referring to things that you know about them. And these may not be the deeper elements of them, but what kind of movies do they like? What kind of video games, TV, books? All of these things are going to help you as a DM figure out where it is that their head is when they're making these decisions as their characters, and what sort of storylines and things will resonate with them. You want to also take note of what things have caught your players' eyes and caught their attention through game. So in addition to knowing them, hopefully you're playing with folks that you can say but that's not always the case. So if chat has come up or hasn't come up, I should say, if you haven't had a chance to really get in and discuss, hey, what kind of music you like, you're not talking about the books you read between game sessions or anything like that, then really you can fall back on what has happened at the table. If you have a player who's shown a particular affinity for helping the poor and the downtrodden, well, right there is a good place to look for possible consequences. If you have a player that is very much plays their character very much as upwardly mobile, very much concerned with status and the acquisition of those things that can help them gain that status and maintain that status, that's an area to focus for that player. Clerics, some characters have built-in hooks. A cleric generally is going to be pretty concerned with the state of his religion, his order, his deity. Monks are similarly connected. Paladins have that built in. A wizard could have have a wizard's guild or wizard's brotherhood or whatever that's very important to him. So things that happen at the table can often help you where you may be lacking in real life connection with your players. This is perhaps more useful, say, like in an online game or casual meetup games, where maybe you've cobbled together a group of players out of whoever happened to sign up on the sheet at the local game store. So the other thing to recognize too, because this is going to be there's going to be a lot of other things here. But the other thing to remember is that not every player is going to respond to the same sort of consequences. If you have an evil member in the party, that evil member of the party, whether whatever the class is, while attacking his wealth and attacking his resources or his status or his greater plot may be important to him, he's not going to care necessarily about the state of the poor or the cleric's order. Now, you may have particularly empathetic players or empathic players, excuse me, and they may very well buy into the consequences that affect the other players and their characters. Player and character here is almost interchangeable, but not necessarily the same. So you may have those players that when the paladin is hurting, they are hurting. When the ranger is angry, they are angry. But you could have that thief who's just like, if it's not shiny and sparkly, I don't care. Let's move on. So make sure that you are, regardless of where these consequences are coming from, understand that they're not going to affect every member of the party the same, and realize that is okay. So, it's okay if it doesn't affect everybody. Leave it there. Let that be the situation. There will be chances to show consequences to other characters later on. And you're not going to be spending the entire time showing consequences to your players. This is only really when it's either fits the story, perhaps the players are acting in a way that really is not helping the story. Perhaps they're just getting too far ahead of themselves, too full of themselves. They're having this elevated or inflated level of self-confidence, which is good to a point. Then consequences, that's when you want to try and pull in the consequences or actions. If you're hitting them over the head with the consequences of their actions all the time, then every goblin they encounter is going to be a moral dilemma. And we don't want that. Goblins are bad. Goblins generally get killed. Bandits are bad. Bandits generally get killed. Unless you as the DM need it to be otherwise, and then play that up. So, consequences here, again, are those mid-range ones, not the immediate effects of action. I didn't get to the lever in time. The dam floods the village. They're not long term. Bilbo finds the ring in the cave. Nobody's really seeing the War of the Ring coming at that moment. So then the next thing I want to talk to you about is recognizing where the line is. What is it that you can and cannot take away or demonstrate consequence through without really ticking off your players and without potentially wrecking your game? Things that I consider really off limits, unless they focus central to the story, in which case that's kind of the reward of that player may be the focus. You don't want to cripple, maim, or otherwise permanently hinder a character as a consequence, unless it's really a blatant consequence. And usually if that happens, that's going to be more in terms of an immediate effect, so it really doesn't fall within this discussion, but it is important to recognize that is still a thing. If you make a bad decision when negotiating with the genie, and it messes you up and you lose a level of experience, that's an immediate effect. We're not talking about immediate consequences. If you use the wrong wording with the Sphinx and you get hurtled through time and space, that right away. It's not going to come back to haunt you. And later on, it might, but it's not like you didn't see that coming. So the other thing to do is make sure that when you are affecting characters with consequence, and the players that are behind them, don't focus the consequences on the key elements of that character. If you take away their favorite magic item, or you cut them off from their deity or whatever it is, completely ruin their status in the kingdom. Let's say you're at a higher level campaign and one of your players has become a lord, and you're his actions you feel are the sort that would have been detrimental to his holding, don't have him come back and find somebody else on the throne. That's taking away his signature element. Now, if that is going to be the focus of the campaign, it's okay probably in that case to do it, because in this case the consequence is also the reward for the player. You are taking something from him that's key to him, but then the next arc, the entire next bit of your campaign, is going to be focusing on him. So that is, if you're going, try not to. If you're try to avoid doing, these attacks at the core of the characters, but if you have to, or if you feel that it would make for a good game, then your consequence can also be the reward of having the next leg of your story be very focused on that particular player, or maybe a couple of players if they have tightly connected characters. So just to kind of recap, you've got what's important to the players, what it is that they value, and recognizing that not everything is going to be the same between the players as far as value, and then also recognize where the line is, what it is you can take away, what it is you can affect that is not going to break your characters or their game, or your game. So what can you do? This is actually kind of, we've established the sort of the why and the how, and what really is or are some good ways to bring about consequences in game. Well, the easiest is resource loss. And resource loss in this context is not so much your bag of gold lit on fire and so all the coins dropped behind you as you were fleeing the dragon lair. All your work was for naught. Resource loss is, in my mind, about NPCs, favorite locations, background elements, treasures that have been amassed elsewhere. So, to use an example here, the example that I just stated. So yes, you got out of the dragon's lair, you lost that coinage that you had. You maybe dropped the gold, the goblet or whatever, but maybe the focus here was not to steal treasure. Maybe you were warned not to steal the treasure, not to touch the dragon's treasure. And so maybe sounding a little familiar, but if I'm gonna rip off Tolkien, then might as well go all the way. So the dragon comes out. He's pissed off at the town. The town is now burnt asunder. There's a consequence. You've got an NPC in there that's being affected, or a couple of them. You've also got a location that the players have spent a little bit of time with and may feel connected to. So that's kind of a twofer right there. Probably better at, in that case as a twofer, because none of the NPCs in Lake Town were overly important to the party, and they hadn't really spent too much time there. But if your paladin decides to let his oath get the better of him, and he goes in and he kills the high priest of such and such kingdom, and he gets away with it seemingly, well, what's the repercussion of that going to be? If he if it was a situation where really the paladin wasn't supposed to kill or there was a better way to handle that than killing the high priest. And we're talking about a guy who's pretty elevated, and especially if we're talking about like a public religion, something that's pretty mainstream. You walk into the town, into the city's cathedral, and you kill the archbishop, right there in front of everybody. That's different than you had a run in with the corrupt priest, in one of the local villages. So in that case, the paladin might have, some of the NPCs might turn against him. What are the brothers in his order going to do? He might find that it's hard, favorite locations. What kind of effect is that going to have when he goes around? Oh, you're the man who killed the bishop. we don't want your kind here. We're not going to serve you. So the inn that he had gone to is, if anything, going to be less comfortable, and he's going to have to spend some more time dealing with that, and it's gonna bring it home. If you have, if that character has a background where maybe he's a long line of paladins, and back at home, his father is elderly, he's taken his father's place in the order. What happens when he comes home and the family manor is stripped? His father and his mother and his two sisters and his favorite dog are all out in the mud. The player now has to consider what has happened. But you're framing this in a way that is dramatic enough to where they really, hopefully at least, unless you have a particularly petty player, they're going to recognize this as not only an option, not only a consequence of their action, but a dramatic note. So when you're dealing consequences, you want to make sure that you are doing them in a way that is still benefiting your story. Random consequences are just that. They're hateful, spiteful acts by the DM, and they really don't do anything. But finding out that you've disgraced your family because you went too far. There were other ways maybe that you could have handled that, but your oath was so strong that you felt that you had to take immediate action and punish that, that pinnacle of your holy order who had gone astray. You made the action, you stuck to your oath. That is good, but it can still have a good, solid, dramatic story turn. That is going to make for some great fun for your party, because your players are now, oh my god, the paladin, this guy has carried us. And this is the thing, these consequences aren't designed so much, again, they're not designed to punish the players. They're designed to demonstrate consequence of action and help that move the story along. Consequences will bring your party together. They may have some friction, but even in a case where you have something that happens among the party and they're arguing and they're bickering amongst the characters, it's still role-playing. They're still having fun. So, sure, the paladin, I'm going to continue this particular analogy because this example, because it's a good one. So the paladin is now bereft of title and holding. He's on his own. His oath is still there. His oath is to his god. His order be damned. But he's now got to figure out what to do with his family, how to take care of them. He might turn to the other players or the other characters. He might turn to other resources. His resources may have been compromised by his actions. So now he is, perhaps the player and their character had maybe been hogging the game a bit. Maybe every time they came up with a big foe, he yelled about his oath, charged in there, got the party in trouble, took all the glory for himself. Now he's going to have to deal with a bout of bout of humility. He's going to have to eat some humble pie. He's going to be going around going, hey, my family needs a place. Ranger, is there a room in your enclave? Durgan, the dwarven warrior who I fought by so many times, could you call upon your kin to make sure my family is safe? Or maybe they'll call on an NPC. Maybe they can go back to the merchant. The villagers in that other village that they saved, from the ravages of a wyvern. They're going to have to roleplay this out. So, NPCs, favorite locations, background elements, treasures, these are all things to really focus the consequences on. That was background elements there in NPCs and locations. Treasures may be a little trickier. I guess, to continue this example, the paladin might find that, his treasure his assets have been seized. So at least everything that he had stored away in the vaults of the order he no longer has access to, which in of itself can now breed new adventure down the way. So the next time the party's like, okay, we're going on this new quest, we've got to go ahead and take out this lich, and hey, remember that thing that we locked up in your vault? Because what is a safe place to lock up your goods in? What's a more safe place than, you know, the vault in a paladin stronghold? Oh, we can't get to that. So either now they have to sneak in, or they have to role play some sort of, you know, they have to find a sympathetic ear within the order who will, you know, look the other way while they go into the vault, or maybe bring the item out from the vault. You know, maybe they're just going to have to completely look, you know, for a different option. Could be that the entire party has been storing their resources there, and so this is going to cause some friction between the party and the paladin. But again, we're role playing, and we're building character, and we're growing the story. So the other way to do that's kind of the physical, tangible things. The other things that you can do as far as the fallout for consequences are difficulty multipliers and plot manipulation. So difficulty multipliers should be such as, okay, you know, you were really brash in how you got that information. You know, Durgan got tired of waiting for all of the questions and answers and the courtly interplay between the paladin and the learned cleric and the bard. He was just bored. He decided to go up and smack that merchant upside the head with his hammer, and now they got the information, but now they're blacklisted. You know, so that and so that would be an example of like an NPC or resource effect. But maybe as far as difficulty multipliers go, and difficulty multiplier is not a statistical multiplier. This is just, now it has become harder to do something. So they leave the merchant, they go on to the quest, but the merchant's talked. Before he would have been maybe left to the devices of the bard and the paladin and the cleric, he would have given up the information and not been wise as to what was going on, or maybe in a way that he felt, oh, sure, they know this, but what can they do? But now he's been abused, quote unquote. He's been roughed up by the dwarf, and so he's got a bit of a chip. So now he's more inclined to talk. He's gonna talk about what happened. Maybe word of that gets back to the wrong people. So when the party reaches the destination with the information that they had acquired from the merchant, they find that rather than having 3 guards at the gate, the stronghold or the manor house or the caves or the whatever is on high alert. They've tripled the guard, and the master of the order is there personally to oversee that everything goes on. He's not going to sit in his stronghold and just kind of report to me when it's here. He's going to be there, and he's going to personally escort that shipment or that prisoner or oversee that ritual, whatever it is. You know, he is now going to take a hand in it. So the at least the entry into this adventure has now become less a matter of get past a few guards, and it is now going to be a fight, or it's going to force the party to now work harder to get in. While their original plan may have been a storm the gates, heroic charge, now they might have to sneak in through a sewer line, or find the Sally gate, or bribe a guard, or something. So difficulty multipliers. Difficulty multipliers could be that, yes, you know that there is a magic lock, but in the process of acquiring that magic lock, or the information, and hopefully the key, you got the information, but the key was destroyed. Now, that is more often going to be an immediate effect. I mean, the parties, at that point, the party should know that, hey, we burned down the library, the magic key was inside, we hadn't got to the magic key yet. Damn. But it could be that in the process of this setting, maybe the magic key wasn't there. Maybe yes, they got the information, but now the magic key is beyond their reach. It is locked up. It's going to be harder to get that next thing. So difficulty multipliers are, they can be a matter of making the encounters more difficult. They can be a matter of, having to make a side trip now. They can be a matter of it's just that much harder to make the skill rolls to achieve the goals that were needed to get through that. And this should be based on what happened. It's key to make sure that your consequences are directly attributable to some sort of an action, which is why we don't look. Why in the case of this argument, we're not looking at long-term consequences. We're not looking at, who would have known that because the Lord of the Land studied in such and such province, that when his heir was raised down the road and he came to power, that his mentality would be influenced as such. We're not I mean, those long-term things are generally so nebulous that your players are not going to relate a consequence to that. If you're really good, you might get down there and they come to the final battle and they're like, oh, there was that guy and he had the thing and we did that, and wow, he's here. He is the evil overlord. That's pretty trite. It's gonna be pretty obvious. And immediate consequences, again, we're not talking about those because those are going to be readily available. So your consequence needs to happen recognizably linked to something else, and generally within a short enough time period to where it is still attributable. So that doesn't mean in the same game session. That can mean down the road a couple of sessions. With the paladin example, it could be a string of things, but don't be too heavy-handed with that. You don't want to find him messed up at every turn. If you already had him suffer badly at the hands of his order, you might not want to have his family affected. Maybe his family is, his father's reputation in the order precedes him and he's safe. In fact, it may be that he gets back and his father's fine, but now his father's angry at him. With some resource denial there. I'll not have you in my home until you have, righted your wrongs. Out with you. You've made your mother cry, and your dog hates you. But the last bit is plot manipulation. Now, this kind of ties into some of the other stuff, but plot manipulation can be recognizable as a consequence, but generally it has to be handled very carefully, otherwise they don't recognize that it's an element of the consequences. So some of the example I've used with the paladin could certainly be used as build up to plot manipulation. Perhaps as part of this quest, the party has been counting on the backing of the order of the paladin's order to achieve the final goal, to defeat that big bad. They've been gathering resources. They've been trying to suss out, who was kind of the mid-range bad guy, and that was maybe the bishop in this case. So in this case, the bishop was then the stepping stone to the demon that the bishop has been in collusion with to manipulate the kingdom. Or maybe the demon, maybe the bishop is working with the drow, or maybe the bishop is working with the king of another country, and so the plot here would maybe change. So the plot, thickens. The party doesn't get the backing of the paladin's order, or maybe a reduced backing. That would tie into difficulty multiplier, where they may have previously been able to count on the entire backing of the order and had an army of paladins to face off against the big bad at the crescendo of the campaign. Now they have a handful. Maybe they have none. Also, what is this going to do with the plot? If the bishop is dead, then the big bad has lost his primary agent within the kingdom. So how does this change? He's still got a plot going on. He's still got a plot. Maybe his timetable steps up, and rather than waiting to undermine the kingdom through the rhetoric coming out of the various churches and the various holy men that are all networked with the from the bishop and his wealth and his manipulations. Maybe now that that is gone, the the big bad at the end finds a new agent. So now the tack of the campaign, the plot has shifted. So now we're not going against the bishop, who is doing this now. Now we're getting, wait, now why are we constantly getting bombarded by assassins and hired killers and really well paid, high quality ones at that? Oh, there was a merchant that was also a part of this plot. He is now the backup. He's the kind of the fallback for when the bishop fell. So he has currency, he has wealth, he can manipulate the markets, he can do his own destabilization. Ships are burning in the harbor. Muhaha, we'll make those peasants pay for their goods. Or I'll get the other merchant houses pissed off. Could be that the timetable steps up completely, and your big bad at the end, he just screw it. There's damage has already been done. The kingdom's not as well off as it was. I'm going to attack now. So suddenly the players find themselves a bit flat-footed. The plot has changed, where they would have had a bit of time to gather some resources. They were supposed to gather their friends. They were supposed to get the Holy Order of the Paladins. They were supposed to expose the bishop. Maybe producing a battle call within the realm of, hey, look, we've been manipulated. Grrr, let's hate the big bad guy. Now they don't have that. The big bad's coming in. They may still have that, but they're going to have to rush around, or they're going to have to fight with what they have, or they may have to do a bunch of holding actions till they can really get their resources in place. Maybe the dwarves that Durgan had already secured, they're still a month out. They're going by foot. They're dwarves. They're slow. Maybe the elves are still sitting on their butt waiting for the celebration of the Silver Oaks to finish, and they can't do anything until that's done. Got a bit of a Leonidas there. I can't march towards such and such holiday. But that plot manipulation comes in, and suddenly the players find themselves in a different setting, a different buildup, a different flow than they would have had the consequences not come in. So consequences, they're really going to help add depth to your game. Key thing to remember, consequences are never best when they're done as punishments. They should always read as something that enriches the story, enriches the game in a way that the players can't really get too mad at. If you're doing your job really well, they'll be like, oh my god, that's amazing. Oh crap, my father, he's out in the mud, my favorite dog. They're gonna, Durgan's like, great, I'm cut off. I'm no longer prince of the kingdom on the mountain. Great, thanks guys. There's a hit put out by the Thieves Guild on the thief in the party. The rogue in the party is suddenly finding himself the target of his own group. Our RC is, you are left destitute. Whatever the case, let your players feel the consequences of their actions. It'll make your game better. It'll enrich the experience, and hopefully, if you're doing it right, you're gonna have a lot more fun. Anyways, hitting about the cutoff mark for what I like on these videos. Like, share, subscribe, comment, questions. Let me know about what consequences you've run for your players. Ask me questions. If you have a consequence that you're thinking about and you're not quite really sure if it's cool, maybe you think it's kind of a dick move, put it in the comments or message me directly. We'll talk about it. But anyways, this is Eli with Elfbait. Have a great one. Get out and game.